make friends with people who also find the joy in things, so that when you're bummed out, they can be like, well, yeah, I get it, but this is cool though. And then you can kind of bring each other up instead of just talking about the stuff that is a bummer.
I feel like I've known this guest personally for years, but we actually just met a couple months ago. We talk about that in this episode, and I just think the world of her. Such a cool person. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. We are chatting today with Amanda Rice-Johnston, who is based in Pittsburgh. I'll let her tell her own story. She's doing all kinds of interesting projects, and we dig into topics near and dear to my heart, and that I think are really important to get out there right anytime, but right now in particular. So we talk about the perils of freelancing, the fears and the anxieties surrounding that. We talk about what it's like being a woman in the bass world, and I'll again let her expand on that. I think it's an incredibly valuable discussion that we had, and lots of fun, and I just had such a great time doing this. I want to give a quick shout out here at the beginning to our sponsors, Upton Bass, Modacity, D'Addario Strings, A440 Violin Shop, and Colstein Music. Thank you so much, and here we go with today's episode. Amanda Rice-Johnston, who I met in person for the first time 2 months ago.
Just a couple months, February, March?
I don't remember what it was, somewhere around there.
Yeah. At the symposium in Pittsburgh.
But I feel like I've known you for forever because we've been in touch. I don't even remember how, over the internet somehow. We have a mutual friend, Brent Edmondson, and many other mutual friends as well. So I saw you at Micah Howard's place, at Pittsburgh Symphony bassist and Pittsburgh Bass Symposium organizer, and I was like, I know you, and I felt like we were carrying on a conversation like old friends.
Yeah, it was like meeting just an old friend. I remember listening to Contrabass Conversations, in the back at my part-time job when I first moved to Pittsburgh, like 12 years ago.
Yeah, those are pretty crusty recordings. So I thank you for sticking with me. Those first ones I recorded, the audio would get out of sync. And so what would happen was I would get ahead of the guest. And so I would start laughing like a weirdo as they were saying something not funny. Then they say something funny and there'd be like dead silence. So hopefully we've gotten a little better. We've at least got a sign now behind you. So
it's a good sign.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. We could talk about a billion things, but what are you doing here at ISB 2019?
Well, I'm actually here. I'm here to help out a friend of mine, Naj Qureshi. Just started up a business importing Italian basses. So he and I played in the American Youth Philharmonic back in the day, like in Northern Virginia, and reconnected a few years ago. And this is his first time setting up here and selling, and so I'm helping out, just playing Italian basses all day. And
that's not a bad gig.
Yeah, it's been really nice. It's neat. You interact with people in a different way as a vendor, and so it's been really interesting.
You do interact with people in a different way. I've worked on the other side of the exhibit space for the last couple of years, and it's really interesting, especially because I've never really been in sales. Not that we're exactly doing sales, but we're kind of doing sales. Well, and I tend to be kind of shy, so I don't approach people generally. But this is helping me learn how to do that, and it makes it a lot easier, because you have a reason to talk to anyone, which is pretty neat. Yeah, I know. It makes me think about when I'm buying clothes or whatever, and someone comes up and is like, "How's it going?" Blah blah blah. I do the same thing with instruments or whatever I happen to be working on. So, but we mentioned Pittsburgh, where you live, and maybe go through. You do many things. Maybe go through the different activities that you do, bass and non-bass related these days.
Oh my gosh! Well, most of my work is subbing. I sub for the opera and the ballet, a fair amount with the Grand Rapids Symphony, and then I'm principal in the Westmoreland Symphony, a regional orchestra. I play in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I am in a 7-person chamber ensemble, the Casilla Ensemble. That's all women, mixed instrumentation, so it's a quintet plus clarinet and harp. So we're trying to build up that. We're working on doing commissions and like learning how to build websites and finding rep from diverse composers. Like it's really interesting and very different from freelancing. So
Right.
it's like exhausting but very rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And then to get health insurance, I work at a cheese shop part-time.
And you've been doing that for a while,
Yeah,
right?
I'm a
And you
certified
like
cheese.
it.
I love it. I mean, it's an education I never could have afforded.
Yeah.
As a buyer of cheese, but it's neat. I might go to there's a cheese convention later this summer that I might also get to go to. So like, it's cool.
There's a bassist named Alan Santos, who's been on the podcast before. Old friend of mine. We played festivals back 10, 12, 15 years ago. And he moved from being a bassist into being a life coach, which is an interesting path. But he also intentionally works part-time because he enjoys it at a bakery in Santa Cruz. And it was interesting. And he speaks with such like enthusiasm about that, which some people might like, oh, that doesn't sound like fun, but he absolutely thinks it's a real highlight for him. Last time I checked, anyway.
I mean, you get to use the creativity that is natural to a musician. Like you get to use it in a completely different way, and it's so interesting. And I mean, food and music, like it goes so well together.
It's true.
Who doesn't love baked goods?
And so here's a theory of mine that I will bounce off of you and see what you think. Okay, because we've done a lot of, I've never worked in a cheese shop, but we've done a lot of similar things. I think probably we get into music, most of us, because we're creative. But I've done a lot of freelance work too. Being creative in that role is a liability usually. You don't want to be creative in the bass section. So and so I found myself, and you may or may not relate, but I found myself being like a driver to destinations and a hauler of basses and like a player doing exactly what people told me to do. And I started to feel like I was getting more creative when I started doing more writing and when I started to. And so, yeah, life is creative and lots of things are creative. And in some ways, I've almost found some of my musical pursuits to be less creative than some of the other things in my life, just because maybe it's different if you're playing jazz or something, but that's just something I've pondered on my long drives to gigs around the Midwest.
It's I hadn't played a lot of chamber music before joining this group, and the difference between like getting called by a contractor, showing up to a gig, like you sit in the middle of the section, like you follow the principal, you follow the conductor, like you're set,
Right.
like what you have to do.
Yeah.
But with a group where everyone is contributing and like deciding, when to play the gigs, like what kind of shows to do, what rep to do. It takes a while to realize that it's all something that you can contribute to.
Yeah.
Because as a bass player, I don't know a lot about chamber music. The upper strings in the group know a lot more. So for the first year or so, I was very, very in the background. And then I started to realize like, I can contribute too. And like, I can, come up with ideas for programs, and it took a while to make that switch, and it's been very rewarding.
Oh, that's awesome that you made that switch.
It's cool. I mean, I'm still working on it.
Or developing it. I played in a chamber music. I love playing chamber music. I didn't do a lot of it. And then about 15 years ago, I started playing in a group up in Door County, Wisconsin. But I felt exactly like what you're talking about, like the first few years, like just not I'd be playing a string quintet and the violin, it's people that are professors or they play chamber music full time or whatever.
Yeah.
And I felt, and I did start to suggest more, but I always felt a little bit out of my element. I loved it, and it is. I find myself exercising creativity in a really different way in that kind of setting when you're one to a part.
Yeah, once you figure out that you are relevant as a member of a small ensemble, like that your voice is as important as the violins, and it's cool.
Yeah.
I wish I could articulate that.
I know exactly
better.
what you're saying. No, it's a different feeling, especially if you play. Maybe people who play primarily jazz have a different feeling, but it's really different. It's like being in a choir versus being a one on a part for something in a vocal context. That's cool that you're doing that,
it's fun.
And getting into the programming and everything.
Yeah,
it's
well, because we're trying to find equity in the diversity of our composers.
Yeah.
So like we're trying to find more women composers, more people of color, and it's hard. Like figuring out how to do that. Like we're getting a lot better at it, but like we're trying to program like all women composers, and so like there are chamber pieces that I love to play. That it's like, well, we'll do that in another season. Like let's find something new now, and then over the years we'll kind of blend together. So like next year we just started programming for we're playing a recital at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, which is where the shooting was. And we're doing a Joan Tower clarinet quintet and with the Brahms clarinet quintet.
Cool.
And like figuring out how to fill that in.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting.
Wow. It's the School of the Arts in San Francisco, SOTA, the high school for the art. Yeah, right. The orchestra director, Tristan Arnold, also a bass player. Shout out to Tristan. He programmed their last concert, which is like maybe 3 weeks ago, all female composers. And he said, and Amy Beach, the symphony, one of her symphonies was the final piece, and there were some composers from one of the students wrote a piece too, and it was interesting, and he had some great thoughts about that, and he's like, how many times I would have to do this to make up for all my all male programs forever. And I think about that with the I would assume nobody wants to be featured just because they're a woman. But I think about that like with what I do with the podcast. If I'm not careful, it's just a bunch of dudes, and so I don't know if that's my fault or but I think about that a lot, and I try to. And probably anybody programming anything like that, it's an interesting balance and mix.
Yeah, like you don't want to be a token performer.
Nobody wants to. I would think nobody
composer.
wants to be that, right?
Yeah, it's something that it's just been status quo for so long. Like I didn't even notice really until a couple of years ago that like you could play for an entire year or an entire decade and never have a female composer on any programs that you play. And it's like, oh, maybe there's some stuff out there that's good that could come into the standard rep and
and if you don't hear it, you're not going to know, right?
Yeah.
You got to give it a chance.
So it's very cool.
Yeah.
So someone like Andrea Clearfield.
Yep.
Jessica Meyer. I'm trying to think of like my favorite new composers that I had never heard of until last night. The Chi-Chi's concert.
Yeah,
with,
wasn't that cool?
Erlen
the name's escaping me, but
Wellen. It was amazing.
Yeah,
And I would love to look into that and see what else she has written, and it's just cool. It's cool. It's so cool to see it happening now.
Yeah. And it's cool to be a part of it and part of a group like that where you're looking and involved with that. Yeah,
because like now we're a group of 7 female musicians, and like that's a big part of our identity and mission. But hopefully that will eventually become the most unremarkable part of our, hopefully that's just will become regular. TBD. I guess.
Buying a double bass is a challenge for sure, and it's not getting any easier. That's why it's so great that Colstein's is offering interest-free financing on select instruments, bows, and instrument repair purchases. Learn more at Colstein.com, and while you're there, check out their wonderful selection of pedigree instruments and bows and everything else that they have to offer. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. Did you know that you can tell the difference between D'Addario strings by the silking? Peg and silking denotes pitch and tension. So E is green, A is black, D is yellow, and G is red. C, by the way, is purple if you have a C string. A thin band of yellow just before the metal winding denotes light tension, and a thin orange band of silking denotes heavy tension. Ball end silking, that's the stuff down by the tailpiece, denotes string family like Kaplan, Helicore, or Zyex. Learn more at orchestral.d'addario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast.
Did you think that you'd be doing what you're doing now, like 10 years ago?
No, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
I don't know either for myself. I'm just asking. Yeah.
10 years ago, I never would have. I never would have imagined. 10 years ago, I never would have imagined I'd be here trying to sell basses at ISB, talking to the host of Contrabass Conversations. Like it's very cool. I mean, 10 years ago, I would have been imagining like the big orchestra job.
So you were going for that?
Yeah,
going
I mean,
through the school,
you
still
like,
are, of course.
Still taking all the auditions, but that was like the life that was imaginable, and now it's like, well, this is a living,
right?
It's very interesting. It's very varied.
What you're doing, I've thought that my thoughts are what you're doing is what most musicians have done for most of time. This, and again, I may or may not be right, in terms of, but the, this era of the full-time orchestra job as an expectation for people in the classical world. Jazz people have never had this expectation, but I do think there was a period of time, maybe a couple decades, give or take, that you go and you train with the right person and they make a phone call to the conductor but if you go back to 1920, I think that the Chicago Symphony is a part-time gig, and the Milwaukee Symphony and other groups like that were a part-time gig until the 70s. And then if we go back a few years before that, everyone was doing like what you're doing or what I've done at periods in my life. So it's interesting. And what would you... Sorry, I'm kidding you with all these big questions.
Yeah,
but it's
I'm ready.
Okay, good. If you were going to talk to somebody who is in, or I guess you kind of are right now, to somebody that's maybe in undergrad or in masters, like just talk about the life that you're leading right now. And again, it could change. You could be in a professional orchestra in a year or two. You could move into selling basses full time. Who knows? Whatever. But like your set of activities, playing in these different groups, and the chamber music, and then working at the cheese shop. It seems to me like you're pretty happy. Yeah. And so just talk about how you integrate all this, how you feel about it, what people might not expect, what challenges or satisfactions maybe unique to kind of what you do. Big question. Sorry.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm trying to think of what would have been very helpful for me to hear. Always have your calendar.
Yeah.
And have an efficient way to just like look at it, put things in it, like always be ready to, because when you're trying to balance a lot of stuff, it's easy to speak to someone about a gig and then forget to write it down.
Always make sure you do what you say, get in the book. Yeah.
And do it as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Because I
learned the hard way.
In my youth, I made some mistakes about double booking and forgetting and not getting back to the contractor quickly. I guess I don't. I mean, there's definitely times when I feel like I just did this gig, like it didn't pay that much, like I'm doing an 8-hour shift at the cheese shop. God, I still have to wear a uniform. Like this is the worst. The more you can find small things you enjoy, like find the joy in like your buddy who also plays the terrible gig, or like the music was good, or the shift is long, but like you get to ice a wheel of Stilton like a cake, like it's and find people. Make friends with people who also find the joy in things, so that when you're bummed out, they can be like, well, yeah, I get it, but this is cool though.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of bring each other up instead of just talking about the stuff that is a bummer.
Well, there's a guy who hosts a podcast called the Brass Junkies, named Lance LeDuc, and teaches a lot. And you may have heard his name.
Yeah.
He has said before, you got 3 criteria for a gig.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to pay you well.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be a good hang, or it's got to be musically good. And you got to have 2 of the 3. So you can have a bad paying gig, but it's a good hang and musically good. Good paying gig, good hang, crappy music, right? Did I get that right? And I like that, and I've started applying that to when I get an opportunity. It's like, $100. I don't know about those people in that bass section, and but the conductor's great,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
The only orchestra I've ever resigned from, I found myself like driving an hour and a half.
Yep.
For a small paycheck.
Yep.
And it was musically unsatisfying.
Oh, you just described a gig I resigned from. Yeah.
And it was like a couple years of that, and I was like, I can't do it. And I resigned, and it was such a weight off. Like it wasn't that much worse in any one of those aspects than any other gig, but.
The scary thing about that is the feast or famine that we all have in this business,
That's
right?
true.
And then
That's true.
but like I'm sure you had a similar experience. I resigned from a gig very similar, and that weight feeling you're describing. I thought I don't miss one thing about this gig. I don't miss, And then I thought, but I made like $5,000 throughout the year at this gig. But then so I thought, I am saying no to $5,000 or something like that. But then the next year I look at my taxes, I made more than $5,000 above. So I'm like, well, I obviously filled that space.
Because you're clearing space for opportunities that you're more suited for.
Yeah, but that's a hard thing to do.
It is.
And like figuring out that what to say yes to and when, and it's so different in everybody's career, right? Like if they're starting out, I don't know about you, but I said yes to everything that was a blank in the calendar, right?
Yeah.
Then, oh no, too busy. Figure out what to say no to and what to get out of and all that. So but just knowing that, people rarely land and all of a sudden are, on fire in terms of anything that's sort of freelance in nature musically. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, so like Falls Church.
Okay.
I studied with Roger McKay first, who's been it's been amazing seeing him at the convention this week. Then Bill Vaughn.
Yep.
Then I went to Michigan State with Jack Budrow. And
nice.
Then
who was at Michigan State with you?
Oh my gosh, everyone. Spencer Phillips, who's here. Chris Hornung, who's working at the Lemur booth here.
We were hanging out a few nights ago, right?
Yeah. Eddie Haspatcher, Corey Palmer. Who would just do? I just saw the interview
right,
come
exactly.
out. Adam Hopkins, Allie Cook, Andrew. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. He plays in Winnipeg.
Andrew Goodlett?
Andrew Goodlett.
Yeah, he used to play with me in the Elgin Symphony for a year before he got that job. Yeah.
He's great. It was a crazy Brad Barrett. I'm trying to think, because everyone's like gone on to do like really interesting things. Michael Hovnanian.
The other Michael Hovnanian. Sorry, man. My teacher is in the Chicago Symphony is also named Michael Hovnanian, and there's another. Yeah.
I've never met the Chicago one.
I'm sure I know one is awesome. I'm sure Michigan Michael Hovnanian.
Michigan Michael is
great.
Is amazing.
Okay, great. We need to get some bass duets with the 2 Michael Hovnanians. I'll bet both of them would be up for it. Would
be really nice. I would like that a lot. I'm trying to I don't want to leave anyone out. But
it's okay.
It was a very large. Yeah. It was a large class. It was like a very supportive bass environment, and it was a really cool to kind of grow up in that in the undergrad. Yeah,
and Jack's a really special teacher. I talked to him long over the podcast. Any favorite Jack memories or funny stories or anything?
I don't. There's so many. I'm trying to. I don't know. I remember one time in a lesson, he was like, there might be snow on the roof, but there's still a fire in the fireplace. Like,
that's a good line. Good. It's a very northern state kind of one.
He was just so wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember all of my favorite.
Well, that's why we have to do a round
like
2. It's just nothing but Jack stories.
That would be nice.
What was next for you after Michigan State?
Then I went to Temple and studied with John Hood. And then Carnegie Mellon. They used to have a performance residency program with Jeff Turner. So I was there, and I got my cheese shop job like my first semester, just because there. And I mean, this is like if an opportunity just like happens, I don't know, see where it goes. I wandered out in front of the music building, and there was a work fair. And there just happened to be like the Market District booth was the one that had the best samples. And so I wanted to take some. So I talked to the lady who was working there, and she was like, come in for an interview. And now I've been a cheesemonger for 12 years, it with health insurance. So yeah, I don't know. It's funny, like the smallest things, like where that will take you eventually.
Totally. All the things I'm doing right now are the result of totally random things I inquired about, or just like decided I'm going to check that out or check this out, or like the tiniest like talking to somebody somewhere or what have you. So yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
What's next?
This episode is brought to you by the A440 Violin Shop. It's located just down the street from Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago on the north side, just off the Brown line. I have been going there my entire adult life, and they have been fantastic, both for repairs. I've had cracks repaired, I've had seams glued, I've had all sorts of students go to A440 to get instruments, to get bows. They're available with a smile, do wonderful work, and definitely check them out if you are in the Midwest. A440violinshop.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Upton Bass, and have you checked out this new travel bass from Upton? Oh my goodness, what a cool looking design. What a great sounding bass. It's just totally remarkable. And the way that they're launching this product, it's just so perfectly Upton. It's bold, it's innovative. You got to check out these videos of Gary Upton unfolding, I don't even know how you describe it, putting together, I guess, this travel bass. It takes almost no time. It is in a Samsonite piece of luggage. I kid you not. It is just a suitcase. It is literally a suitcase bass, but it comes together and it's a real bass. It's a nice sounding bass. So cool. Just another example of the way in which Upton is innovating and blazing new trails for the bass community. So thank you for what you do, Upton, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. Every day when I sit down to practice, I get up my phone and I boot up Modacity, which is my practicing companion, and I have a specific routine I go through, and here is Modacity founder and CEO Mark Gelfo on what he does each day with Modacity.
What I do when I load Modacity every day is, if I don't have a playlist constructed already, what I do is I go in and I think, how long do I have to practice right now? Okay, I've got 40 minutes. Cool, I'm going to do 5 minutes on meditation, get my body state right. I'm going to do scales for 5 minutes, and I'm going to visualize, and I'm going to do this piece that I'm working on. You just set it up, see the budget, and follow the budget effortlessly by delegating that to the phone.
Letting my phone do all those logging details has been so great for my practicing. I can't recommend this app highly enough. Love it, love it, love it. Learn more at modacity.co, and we have a special offer if you go to our site for lifetime access to this app. It's so cool. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Modacity.
Pittsburgh is a cool town.
It's so great. It's great.
Yeah, in all sorts of ways. It reminded me of a guy came there, I think it was March, maybe early March. And so this makes it sound not nice, but it's beautiful. It looks like San Francisco, but in March, it looks like San Francisco if something really bad happened to San Francisco, because it's like everything's brown. But beautiful, like these rolling hills, and the town is cool. It's nestled between all these rivers, and then the bass scene is just outstanding there.
It's amazing. There's so much. I mean, the symphony is amazing. Like every single player is so good. It's just crazy. Like watching them like do what they did the section recital.
Yep.
And they're all good in different, like they all have different sort of interests outside of bass or outside of orchestral that they composition and jazz and it's so amazing to see them as a section and as individual players. And then like the opera's amazing. The ballet is amazing. Like there's music happening all over. There's a like Duquesne, CMU, like there's a lot of communication between the schools, which is great. And and it's so close to like Cleveland and I'm trying to think of
that whole
other
region
cities.
kind of has it.
There's
And
a
I
lot
know
of
that
bass
people
players.
play for each other. Yeah, you can sort of
Yeah.
tell when things are really going right, or I can't, going in and seeing versus like. Some things are going right, but that place really feels like there's just a great energy to the and to see the whole bass section getting involved in these different in the Pittsburgh Bass Symposium and just talking to them about other things that they do outside of that. It's cool. And then there are so many places. Orchestras that you can play in and other things just within a relatively short drive from there.
Oh,
you got all these major population centers. You got Buffalo not too far away, like you said, Cleveland, Cincinnati's not too far away, I think, right?
It's like three, four.
Yeah.
Like Cincinnati, Columbus, Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean, Grand Rapids isn't super close, but
but
it's not that hard to get to.
Right. Yeah, it's very different from like living now. Because I lived more in that region of the country for a long time, and now being out in San Francisco, which there are a lot of people on the West Coast, but. It's 680 miles to Portland and it's 350 or whatever to LA. So, and then it's who knows what east, like Salt Lake City, a day's drive away. So you're kind of, it's pretty, but it's a different scene. So there's not quite as much of that. I love it out there and I love the bass scene, but it's different than like what percentage of the population of the U.S. is within like a day's drive of you. It's got to be ridiculously
a
large
good amount of it.
Yeah, everything except California.
Pretty much.
So, yeah.
It's very central and it's beautiful. And it's like,
beautiful.
It's been, the city's been, since the kind of when the steel mills, like the Big Depression in the 70s, 80s, it's just getting better. In the time that I've lived there, it's been, some problematic gentrification, but like a lot more stuff have been happening. Musical organization, arts. We've one of the best cities to live in by I can't remember if it was. I don't think it was Forbes, but it was one of those.
I've seen that, yeah. And it's one of
like,
those cities. It's like it managed to reinvent itself in a large amount, but with they have lots of tech there. That's kind of
and it's a place where the housing prices are reasonable, so that a freelance musician has a chance of becoming a homeowner, which is
there are not a lot of freelancers living in San Francisco. Let me tell you, I there are some, but it's a hard place. I'm one of not too many bass players that I know living actually in the city of San Francisco, and that's only because my wife's a doctor. So it's like we wouldn't be the Bay Area at all if it were not for that. But this has been long overdue. I want to go try some basses.
Okay.
But give Amanda, starting out at Michigan State, or you can pick the age, but go back and talk to young Amanda. Give her a little bit of advice.
Well, I think one of the things that I realized just this week, like there was the Page panel,
and it's a project for all gender equality, right? Yeah, just make sure they know the acronym. Yeah,
which is a brand new thing for the ISB. Is that I realized that, and I think that my experience as a female bassist is fairly common. I've been thinking about this a lot in like the last 24 hours, so it's like I'm not super articulate yet, but Nina DeCesare.
Yeah.
I think it was her. She wrote an article a few years ago that was where she said something about like the idea of being in a leadership position. She kind of felt like, who am I to deserve this, or like be relevant enough to be there in a way that her male peers never considered.
Right. Right.
And I've always thought that I was just like insecure in a way that my male peers were also, but like they'd figured out how to get over it.
Right.
And I think maybe the difference is that it doesn't occur to them that they're not invited.
Right. They have a seat at the table. There's sort of an expectation. Yeah.
So it's not like you're both dealing with the same thing. They just are better at.
Yeah.
It's that there's this feeling that you have that like they don't even have to deal with. I realized this week that because of that feeling, I have done a lot of things that have sort of put myself in the background. Because who am I? Like, who am I to talk to this person? Like, who am I to ask this person if I can play for them?
Yeah.
Who am I to like demonstrate a bass in front of someone good? Or like in a section, like, who am I to choose these bowings? Like, I know I won the spot, but like, you're from the back of the section, you're telling me that other bowings are better, and like, I don't know, I think mine are good, but maybe they're not. I don't know. Yeah. I think if I could go back and get myself to realize the places where I was minimizing myself because I felt that maybe I don't deserve to be here, to like identify that and stop doing it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, because we identify with what we see all around us, right? And so my wife's in medicine, and if you look at medicine or some other careers where, let's say, gender equity or equality, I'm not sure, is like a few decades along. Like, so my wife's a radiologist. 50% of radiologists are women at this point. It's just absolutely the case.
So
and 50%, normal. It's just completely normal. 50% or whatever, more in a given year, a little less, but whatever, in medical school is the norm. But let's go back now a generation or maybe 2 generations of doctors, and it was 100% male. And then it was like 94% male or something like that. And my wife has gotten comments from that older generation like, you'll make a great lady doctor someday. So that's not that's people aren't probably generally overtly saying that in the bass world, but it's true. We look around and we see, we see in ourselves what we see in the world. And so if you just see a bunch of guys, it doesn't even occur to you. And it's so it's something I've thought a lot about too. Not that I'm a white male doing a podcast, so I'm a pretty safe, but you know what I mean. And we talked about it. Nobody, I would imagine, wants to be featured just because they're a woman. So I've never tried to do that, but I do think it's, I've tried with this show to like bring something I've noticed. Women almost never volunteer themselves to be in the show.
Yeah, it never would, until recently, it never would have occurred to me to like reach out.
So unless I'm proactive, I get nothing but requests. And then also the other problem in the bass world, kind of like with the doctor world, is because that older generation is most predominantly male and they're more famous, those are the people that get recommended to me.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, because I think the advice I would give is like, don't worry about whether or not it's okay to put yourself forward. Like because of that, I spend a lot of my time like worrying about that. Like I don't want to bother this person, so I don't want to like ask them for a lesson. But like everyone asks them, like if they're not, if they're busy, they'll just it's okay to put yourself out there. Like it's okay to ask for opportunities and talk to people about, ask them advice. Like it's okay to do that, and it's something that your male peers are already doing without thinking of it. Like it doesn't even occur to them that it would be like a bother or like you shouldn't. I don't know. One of the things I realized, I had a list of people because I'm taking the Baltimore audition on in a week, and I was like, maybe I'll use this as an opportunity to like play for people. While they're all here. And I had like a whole list of like dream people to play with. And I realized yesterday that there wasn't a single woman on that list. And like that was such a realization, like, holy shit, this is what I do. This is like, I spend so much time thinking, and all of these little things had just never occurred to me. So like I don't know if bias, I guess that's the right word. I don't know, but it runs deep. Like right after that, so I played in the Susan Cahill masterclass. I had heard the name, but I didn't really know who she was.
She's cool.
She's amazing.
She's cool.
She's amazing.
I love Sue.
But before I played, I was watching her with the first guy, and I saw the way she was sitting, and I was like, oh, that looks like how I sit. And then I realized I don't know that I'd ever participated in a masterclass where the presenter looked like me. Like it was like 25 years of a career, and this is the first time I've played in a masterclass for a woman. And I mean, like there have been a couple, Betsy did a couple master classes at SAMU, like back in the day. Carolyn Emery did classes at Domain, in 2002 when I was there. Like, it had never occurred to me that I hadn't really seen this before. And it's just been like, wow. Because like when you videotape yourself, when you see pictures of yourself, like I don't look like how most bass players look. Like the way that my hips sit are a little different. Like, and suddenly seeing how that would work for my physiology, it was so amazing.
Yeah. It's something that Sarah Hogan Kaiser brought. It's not exactly what you're talking about. It's very similar. She said at the very end of it, I chatted with her yesterday. She's in the St. Louis Symphony, by the way. If people don't know, Sarah said, "You know what? I'd love to have you explore more on the podcast." Is Sarah's had 2 kids, and she said playing the bass while pregnant.
Oh my!
No one talks about, and there are probably other. Like if you you're just physiological differences between the male basis and not having that many role models, like maybe sporadically once every 10 years seeing somebody in masterclass. No, that's interesting.
Because she was talking about her kids, and I'm at a point where it's like, well, do I want to have kids?
Yeah.
How would that? How do people do it?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of I know a lot of other musicians who have them, but bass players who have had them physically, like I don't know. Going forward, it's like realizing the self-minimizing thoughts that are happening without consciousness, like noticing them and behaving differently.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't read Sheryl Sandberg's great book, Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook, I forget what her role, one of the high up people on Facebook, but it's interesting talking about similar, feelings, in that sort of various corporate structures she's been in, and it's great. It's a really interesting kind of wake up call. Amanda, you're an awesome guest, so let's do more of this, please. Okay, long overdue.
I'll send you an email.
So let's. Actually.
Amanda, thanks again for chatting. You can find Amanda lots of places, but I think I'll link up to her Instagram in the show notes. That's probably a good spot to connect with her. And thank you for following along with all this live coverage. Is this live coverage? I'm not sure, because I guess it was recorded. I don't know. I'll call it live coverage, for lack of a better term. Thank you for following on with this. I hope you're having a good time. I get so much out of events like this, and I love getting material in the can for several months. It's just such a great opportunity to connect with people. We'll have other things coming out besides ISB coverage in the following months, but you're going to be hearing more of this in the future. If you haven't reached out to me, feedback at Contrabass Conversations will put you in touch with me, and I love hearing from people who listen to the show. I heard from a lot of people at ISB 2019, but obviously the majority of you weren't there, so I love hearing. We're just reaching out and saying hi, or let me know an idea for the show or a guest idea for the show. I keep track of all of that, and that's how we shape where this show goes. Also, if you are a person who hangs out on Facebook, which I'm guessing is many of you, we have a community just for the podcast audience. And we've got over 3,000 people in there, maybe 3,300. I haven't checked recently. You can find it just by going to Facebook and searching for Contrabass Conversations, or you can go to contrabassconversations.com/community. Contrabass Conversations is produced by Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Trevor Jones, and award-winning bass maker Mitch Mooring. Learn more about him at mitchmooring.com. And thank you to Krista Copper of the Backstage Creative Podcast for archiving and cataloging everything we do here on the podcast. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.